Death at Devil's Bridge. Chapter 25. Develop. 1. To set forth or make clear by degrees or in detail expound. 2. To make visible or manifest that which is latent. 3. To subject exposed photographic material to chemicals in order to produce a visible image. 4. To evolve the possibilities of, to promote the growth of, to make available or usable. Charles's laboratory and adjoining dark room were located in the servants' area of Bishop's Keep, in what had once been a game larder. Since the room was below ground level and often cold, he had installed a gas fire to warm it and gas lighting above his work tables. The laboratory was one that any scientist could have claimed with pride, equipped as it was with glass-fronted oaken cabinets filled with chemicals and glassware, solid work tables, a gas burner, and sink with both hot and cold water, chemical balance, and other scientific equipment. On one table was his Lancaster achromatic microscope. It was fitted with rack and fine screw adjustments with a condensing lens on a universal joint. Now that his electrical plant was in operation, he planned to install electrical wiring as well. He could then make use of the newly acquired Crookes tube and a Tesla coil, from which he hoped to couple together a homemade X-ray apparatus built to the specification in Professor Röntgen's recently published paper. The smaller, windowless dark room was adjacent to the laboratory. It was outfitted with work tables with ample water supply, porcelain development tanks, washing and drying racks, an Eastman clock, a Knox enameler, shelves filled with photographic chemicals, printing papers and supplies, as well as a paraffin-burning ruby safelight, soon to be replaced by electric safelights, and a line for drying prints. There was also a Qa'Rajh reducing and enlarging camera, and another purchased from Fallowfield in Charing Cross Road, designed exclusively to produce lantern slides, for which Charles had paid £4 5 This camera had won a silver medal at the Hackney expedition, and was one of his happiest purchases, in spite of the cost. Charles himself was seated on a stool at a laboratory table, intently studying a number of items on the table before him. At his elbow was an enlarged print of the fingerprint he had found on the Daimler's fender. Occasionally he shifted from an examination of one of the objects to the enlargement and then back again. He looked up when he heard a tap on the door. Lawrence came into the room, still wearing the muddy corduroy trousers and brown jerkin he had worn that morning when they hauled the motor car out of the ravine. "Ah, Lawrence," Charles said, "did you find anything more of interest in your examination of the motor car?" "Not a thing, Sir Charles," Lawrence said. "Pocket says to help you in the dark room." "I would like you to make a dozen or so lantern slides," Charles said. "They must be ready by 7 without fail. The negatives have already been developed. You'll find them in the rack. I won't need the limelight, so you can use it with the enlarging camera. And the Central Oxygen Works sent down a fresh cylinder of hydrogen gas, if that proves necessary." "Thank you, sir." Lawrence shifted uncomfortably. "Before I begin, sir, there's something I needs to tell you about, something devilish." Charles, wearing a pair of thin white gloves, had picked up his magnifying lens and returned to examination. "Something devilish?" he asked absently. "What is it?" "The gentleman who was dug out of the dung heap, sir," Lawrence said grimly. "I know who put him there." "You don't say?" Startled, Charles put down his lens. "Well then, who did put him there, Lawrence?" "Dick Quilp, sir," said Charles, "and he was helped by Fred Cortland." "And who," Charles asked in mild astonishment, "are Dick Quilp and Fred Cortland?" "Dick is Amelia's cousin, I'm ashamed to say," Lawrence replied with a long face. "He works in Mr. Hogarth's mill sacking grain. Fred Cortland's the boy who sweeps the crossing on the High Street. Each was paid 2 shillings to cost the gentleman in burying him in the dung heap. Leastwise, that's what Amelia's cousin Jemmy has told his mother, who told Amelia when she went to chapel this morning." Charles stared at him, marvelling once again at the way information was passed around the village. And did Amelia's cousin tell his mother who paid these fellows 2 shillings for such a task? At that moment the door opened and Constable Lakin put his head inside. "Maud said you were here, Charles. Are you fit to be interrupted?" "Come on in, Ned. You're just in time to hear the last of Lawrence's story. He's about to tell us who hired Dick Quilp and Fred Cortland to lam Dunstable on the head and bury him in the dung heap." Lakin came into the room and put down a brown paper parcel on the table. "Quilp and Cortland," he snortled. I shall haul them in for assault, but who was it who hired them? There were 2 men, Jimmy says. He don't know their names, Lawrence replied, but he's seen their motor cars. One of them drives the electric, the other drives the Benz. Bateman and Ponsonby, Lakin exclaimed. Well now. Good work, thank you, Lawrence, Charles said, feeling no great surprise. Listening to the pair and watching their interactions with Dunstable the night before, he had rather suspected them. The dark room is yours, he added. If you have any questions, of course, I'll be right here. When Lawrence had gone into the dark room and closed the door behind him, Charles turned to Lakin. Bateman and Ponsonby, eh? I suppose this clears Dunstable, Lakin said crossly, and Bateman and Ponsonby as well. You've no liking for Dunstable. He's a vulgar rogue, if you ask me. That may be, but as to clearing Bateman and Ponsonby, I don't think it does. There is nothing to say that they could not arrange Dunstable's lambing and sabotage the car in the bargain. Perhaps, he began to unwrap the parcel. I did not find the jar of grease you were looking for, but I made off with a pair of tweed trousers, he pointed. The right leg, below the pocket, bears a streak of red grease with a certain, quite distinctive odour. The clothing belongs to... Stop! Charles held up his hand. Don't tell me, Ned, until I've been able to look at the material under the microscope. In any event, I have something to show you. He gestured at the 9 wine goblets arranged on the table before him. He had dusted each with talcum powder, revealing several clear fingerprints on each glass. Where did you get those goblets? Lakin asked in some surprise. Mutt took them from the dinner table last night, labelled them with the names of who had drank from them, and placed them in his pantry. A most fortuitous bit of business, wouldn't you say? Charles gave a short, dry cough. It relieves me of the need to bully you to obtain the suspect's prints, while it provides us with sufficient evidence to make the comparison. These glasses represent all of our suspects, except for Roger Thornton, and I have high hopes in obtaining his prints by a different method altogether. Lakin was now in a state of utter stupefaction. I confess, I'm staggered, he said, still staring at the goblets. Why in heaven's name should Mudd undertake to perform such amazingly peculiar task? He could not have known... Oh, that was Kate's idea. Kate? Lakin took his eyes off the objects of his amazement and raised them to Charles. But how and why? Charles smiled with some discomfort. I suppose I should have told you this before now, Ned, but I did not see any reason to burden you with the knowledge. My wife, it seems, has a secret identity. She is... I know who she is, Lakin said tersely. She is Beryl Bardwell, the female Conan Doyle. She writes those ridiculously popular fictions in which some lady detective or another is always making the police look like fools. Charles raised both eyebrows. You know about Beryl Bardwell and Kate, then? How did you know? Come now, Charles, everyone in the village and all about knows Kate's cripplings. Once the servants discovered it, there was no keeping it secret any more. I myself have often wished to ask her to present the police in a slightly more intelligent and progressive light, but, Lakin shrugged, I did not like to tell her that her secret was known to one and all. An ironic smile came and went at the corners of his mouth. I was also half afraid that I was the model for her dim-witted policeman. Everyone in the village, eh? Charles remarked thoughtfully, wondering how soon the news would travel to Somerthworth, where it would no doubt send his mother into a hysterical fit. But everything about his wife seemed to affect his mother in any way, so from Kate's Irish heritage to her American upbringing. Why should this be any worse or better? There was a pause, and then when Lakin spoke, there was an edge to his voice. I'm curious to know what led Lady Catherine to collect these goblets last night, before there was any suspicion of a crime. She could not have suspected that the fingerprints on them might be put to use today. Or could she? She was conducting an experiment, Charles replied, with certain pride. The solutions to Beryl Bardwell's current mystery hinges on fingerprints, you see. Kate has read Galton's work on the subject, but she has never actually studied the prints herself. She collected the goblets with some rather unformed idea of examining the fingerprints on them in order to see what problems a detective might face. Most remarkable. Indeed, Charles returned. It was a piece of unbelievable good luck that she also thought to ask Mudd to label the glasses as he took them from the table. Lord preserve us, Lakin muttered. I believe he has, Charles replied almost smugly. You must admit that Kate's idea was most fortuitous. He smiled a little. I sincerely hope that she has not offended your ethical sensibilities, Ned, as an intelligent and progressive policeman, that is, who is concerned to preserve the privacy of the citizenry. Lakin looked embarrassed. Perhaps I overstated the case earlier this afternoon. I do not believe that my conclusions are as settled as I may have made them to appear. I'm glad for that, Charles said, thankfully. I was beginning to fear. He was interrupted by a knock, and the door opened. Excuse me, gentlemen, Kate said. I hope I'm not interrupting you. She held out an envelope. I have brought the photographs that Patsy gave Squire Thornton to look over. She reports that he handled each of them. I dare say you will discover the evidence you need. Charles took the envelope and, opening it carefully, laid out several photographs on the table. Yes, he said, there are a number of quite clear prints. From Squire Thornton, Lakin shook his head, bemused. We seem to have a surfeit of evidence now. I doubt that, Charles said, and I must remind you of the point you quite properly raised earlier, Ned. This fingerprint evidence, I am not at all sure it can be presented to a jury, or that its import could be understood and weighed fairly. He sighed, remembering the difficulty his friend Tom Stevens had experienced in the trial of George Lansom 15 years before, when he had presented some sophisticated toxicological evidence to the jury. The poor jurors, several of whom could not even read, had not understood a single word. But we are far from having a case to present to a jury, he added. First, we must examine. You must examine it, I fear, Kate said. There is a certain young gentleman in the drawing-room who wishes to speak to me on the matter of the heart. At least, that's what I presume his errand to be, since he asked to see me privately. Charles raised both eyebrows. Indeed? And who is this young gentleman? Mr. Rolls, Kate said, and saying nothing else, turned and left the room. Lakin looked very cross. I told that boy to stay at the inn. I imagine he came to see the repairs on the balloon, Charles said. His magnifying lens in hand, he bent over the photographs and began scrutinizing the fingerprints on their glossy surfaces. For a moment he said nothing more. Then shifted to an examination of one of the goblets. He added, He's not the sort of man to take orders, not even from a constable. Lakin spoke cautiously. Did you tell Kate anything about Rolls' malfeasance? No, I took it to be a rumour. In any event, it's none of my business. Marston must look after his sister, and would not take kindly to another man's interference. And with that, Charles handed his friend a magnifying lens and pointed out with his pencil at something. Take a close look at this fingerprint, Ned, and then at the one in the photographic enlargement, which I took from the photo of the fender of Marston's Daimler. He pointed to the enlargement on the table. Tell me, what do you see? There was silence for the next few moments as Lakin bent over the one fingerprint and then to the other. By Jove, he said at last, and a grin broke across his boyish face. I believe we found a match.